Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bobsled Marketing's webinar on the benefits of Seller Central and what to do when your vendor account needs a boost. Going to wait a few more minutes here just to see if there's any last stragglers coming in. So that way we all get started at the same time. So if there's any issues or if there's any problems with the audio, please do post it in the chat. Ed, can you hear us? We'll get started in a couple of minutes. I can hear you, Joanna. How you doing? We all good? All right, everybody. Let's jump in. Let's get started. Thanks again for making the time. Hey, Kiri. Great.
Said, you can hear me okay? Perfect, great. All great.
Jump in. Let's get started. Thanks again for making time. So, first things first, let's give a little overview as to Bobsled, who we are, and thank you again for joining us. Bobsled is a New York City-based agency. We were established in 2015 by Tom and Kiri. We are 25 full-time staff here at Bobsled, including 2 ex-Amazon employees, and we represent over 40 brands on Amazon, North America, Europe, and Australia. We work with third-party sellers through the Seller Central platform. We work on with Amazon vendors through Vendor Central, and hybrid accounts, which is the focus of today's presentation. We represent brands across a broad spectrum of product categories, and really the only categories that we don't work with are vitamins and supplements. So yeah, really happy to have you all here, and to give ourselves a little introduction. I've been at Bobsled for a year now. This is my first sales job, so I apologize if I'm not particularly salesy. Prior to Bobsled, I worked for AMC Tracker, which is a software company that focuses on Amazon-related sales and research and tools, where I was a project manager responsible for product development, marketing strategy, for a SaaS product that automated email messaging for over 8,000 Amazon sellers. Before that, I worked at an Asian manufacturer exporting over 10,000 products from 100 suppliers across Thailand, China, and Myanmar, responsible for sales and marketing strategies of the 15 brands that we sold across Amazon, Etsy, eBay, and Alibaba. Really, what I do for Bobsled is use my experience to support sellers and try and help them navigate the onboarding process with Bobsled. With me today is Joanna Otto, one of our client project managers here, and I'll let Joanna introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name's Joanna, and as Said mentioned, I'm a project manager here at Bobsled. I've been with the company for about 6 months, just started this year. And prior to that, I spent almost 5 years at Amazon working in retail and working in vendor management. In my time there, I focused on large catalogs, organization. I worked in the fashion department, so very familiar with incredibly large catalogs and working with variations, working to strategically grow each specific client depending on their needs and situation, as well as deep diving into inventory management. It's always great to have a second pair of eyes, even if you're on the Vendor Central platform. And as well as working on customer side experience. So making sure that all these items that were quickly getting uploaded and launched on site were customer focused and oriented, and ensuring that it was clarifying and answering any questions that the customer might potentially have. So I'm incredibly excited to be here.
Great. So just a few housekeeping items to discuss. If you have a question, this is an interactive webinar, so please feel free to type your questions in. We'll do our best to address them throughout the presentation and include them. And if there's anything that we don't answer, we'll absolutely try and follow up. We can perhaps even schedule some time to call each other and to address your specific points and needs. This is being recorded, and we will be able to send this out to all of you as requested. So please do reach out, and you should have a copy available to you in your Webinar Ninja account. And if there are any audio issues, please do let us know. This is an audio mostly presentation, so that would be problematic. But without further ado, the agenda for today is pretty straightforward. Answering the questions, can you have 2 accounts? Spoiler alert, you can. The background of the vendor and seller program, just giving an overview of the 2 programs available to you and the differences, advantages and disadvantages of each. Bobsled's hybrid model, so our approach, some specific uses that we've implemented using the hybrid model, when to use it, and of course advantages and disadvantages as well. And there will be tips at the end for brands who are considering switching from one platform to another, or who are looking to implement the best of both worlds. And we'll conclude with just thoughts on the future of Amazon, just where we think these platforms are going, and we'll address any final questions that we hadn't had a chance to throughout the presentation. Great. So first question, can you have both a vendor and a seller central account? The answer is yes. So Joanna, if you can, this is an example of just a brand that's leveraging both Seller Central and Vendor Central. I think you may be familiar with this brand, Joanna. Steve Madden. If you can just walk me through here a little bit what we're seeing, and Amazon is clearly selling these shoes, so it's a vendor relationship that they have. But we also see here towards the bottom that Steve Madden is also choosing to offer this product as a third-party seller. So if you can maybe walk me through the rationale here a little bit, and what were the main pain points that prompted the consideration of the hybrid strategy for Steve Madden?
Yeah, absolutely. So Saeed mentioned earlier, the bottom listing is Steve Madden. So that's third party. They're shipped and sold by Steve Madden Limited. And you can tell that they don't have a prime there. So they're not using FBA. They're shipping directly from the manufacturer. And the situation here, the reason why they decided to consider a hybrid strategy from having a successful Vendor Central account is that this particular brand was very fast fashion. So they were able to manufacture samples right in their offices, and they're able to manufacture a pair of shoes, just with the same day. So they were able, if something stuck, and Steve Madden had a great idea, they were able to produce a brand new product right away, able to ship it out the next day. So the problem that they had with Vendor Central and the excitement where that became an issue with the excitement of launching new products and testing new products all the time, was that there's about a 90-day lead period from Amazon, and a big chunk of that is just making sure the item is set up properly. Amazon spends about 2 weeks getting images of the products as soon as they arrive in the warehouse. So there's quite a delay, and if you have a product that you're just so excited to test, start getting metrics on to be able to analyze, it can be a little bit frustrating. So again, with anything that's really quick to go to the marketplace. So since they were able to produce and send out just within a couple of days a whole new product, they were able to buy a UPC quickly, get that set up, ship it out themselves, and that's mostly what appealed to them. For other brands, for instance, pricing might be the motivator behind that too. So in the same situation, if they were having problems with margin, if Amazon's very complex algorithms were pricing the item below what you want the MSRP to be or the list price, a way you can fight that is to move your items to Seller Central, and there you have greater control over that. So that can be one of the motivators there, not for this particular brand, just because they wanted to pretty much do product testing in the marketplace. So again, with that, one of the reasons too is that they didn't want to wait for POs to go live and launch. There was just something they wanted to test. They just wanted to put, maybe five units in there, maybe one per size, just to get a feel of orders. And if they did get an order, again, they were able to produce it and ship it out the same day. So for them, that wasn't an issue with the timing. But something also to consider, we certainly always urge everyone to go FBA if they are launching on Seller Central, just because you really get that trust from Amazon, Amazon customers, I mean. So if something is sold and shipped by Amazon, a customer knows that they're getting Amazon's customer service. They know that they can have easy returns, quick communication with customer service, and so with Steve Madden, what they did, they decided to just ship non-FBA. Again, they were able to get out a little bit quicker, and also their brand has been established for quite some time. They know that customers trust Steve Madden when they see them as a seller, so they were able to get reviews quickly and up their seller ranking.
Great. So I guess it would be beneficial for everyone if we dove in a little bit deeper into the Vendor Central platform specifically. So I think for those of you who don't know, I think we can't assume that we all come from the same background. So for those that aren't aware, Vendor Central is essentially where you sell first party directly to Amazon on a wholesale basis. Where you're filling in purchase orders that Amazon initiates to you can come in weekly. It can come in a little less frequently. It is also an invitation-only program. So there are specific thresholds that you have to meet, and a lot of questions that we get asked is, can you get me into the Vendor Central program? It's not necessarily something that we can do, but because of the invitation-only component, the way to enter the program potentially is just to be quite successful, get the sales volume up, so that way you get Amazon's attention. The benefits of the Vendor Central platform is, a very low administrative and operational load. Amazon is doing all the heavy lifting for you there. It's a very familiar wholesale model for a lot of large manufacturers. Those who come from the wholesale world, this is a relationship that's easy to understand. Access to enhanced advertising and marketing features via AMS, and AMS is Amazon's marketing services. There are 3 specific ad types available through the AMS platform. Amazon loves a lot of acronyms, so if there are any acronyms that you see here that you want us to clarify for you, please don't hesitate to ask. And then there are the challenges. So there is potential for channel conflict. Channel conflict means, just if there are other sellers selling, just the issue of vendor sort of superseding and creating issues there. Less margins, of course. So the margins being lower because Amazon is buying at a wholesale price from you directly. And the pricing and purchasing process may not support adequate depth or selection. There's no guarantee that Amazon's going to purchase your entire catalog and that they'll purchase it at a price that is sufficient to justify selling to them. And the metrics. So the other thing is the performance metrics and analytics there are there's less of it. And that's something that a lot of people, especially those who are accustomed to making data-driven decisions, might be, just sort of disappointed by. Other common questions. So I'm speaking to a lot of brands all the time, and really there's a common pain points here that some vendors have, specifically like launching new products. What I hear all the time, and Joanna, if you can answer some of these after I go through it, that would be really great. I think that would serve our audience quite well. But specifically, I think it would be launch woes. So just trying to get new products launched as a vendor can be quite difficult. There isn't a demand there. And so getting Amazon and convincing them to make PO sizes is something that would be a common pain point there. The pricing as well. So Amazon may match the lowest offered price, and if there are other people selling your products on Amazon, that aren't adhering to MAP policy or the MSRP that you've set for your price, that may result in some pretty significant issues there. Counterfeiters also just sort of selling fraudulent versions of your product at much lower price points. And then stockouts. That's another pain point that I hear all the time, is just Amazon not ordering enough of a particular brand's best-selling product, and then the inventory and stock being insufficient for projected demand, maybe for, you're planning some outside marketing campaigns, or you're being featured on a specific network, or an influencer is going to promote your product that will increase demand, and Amazon isn't necessarily prepared to meet that. So how, I think this is something that would be great, Joanne, if you could just comment on, you having managed vendor accounts for us here at Bobsled. How common are these issues? What are some ways to address them? And what do you feel is the advantage of using Vendor Central despite these issues?
Absolutely. So the first one you brought up was the launch woes. So this can be anywhere from having slow setup, as I mentioned earlier, just the lead time that Amazon guarantees from the first time you set up your item to getting it on the virtual shelves, so to speak, is that it does take quite a while for Amazon to produce images for your item, just getting it launched on site, and then of course you're met with being in a sea of millions and millions of other Amazon products. So once you start, you have very slow expected sales, and this is generally speaking with any launch, but with Amazon ordering smaller POs, it can be a little frustrating because sometimes, if you're advertising outside of Amazon, if you're using social media, it can be disheartening to see lower PO quantities. And the reason that is just Amazon is, they use their very own forecasting system again, associated with very complicated algorithms, and the logic there is just that they don't want to get you into an inventory situation where you're going to have more inventory, it's going to turn aged, then in turn you'll have to pay a fee on it. So they're very conservative when it comes to inventory ordering, and which can be, again, a bit frustrating when you're just launching your product. And again, perhaps if you know that there's more of a demand outside of Amazon, because you've done a lot of work and spent time marketing outside, or linking your customers to Amazon's website. So if you're selling out quickly, Amazon can take a bit to catch up with that PO demand. Another reason just being that it could be a fluke. So if all of a sudden you have outrageous sales because maybe you're doing an outside promotion, just getting eyeballs to your product, Amazon won't consider that to be the norm. They're going to consider it a fluke until they see it consistently. So because I have seen a lot of frustrations with ordering, and just a lot of questions like, why are they ordering more? Like, can't you see I'm selling out and they're only ordering a few more, and that was less than sales last week? And again, it's all just attributed to Amazon's really complex algorithm wanting to make sure that that's consistent, not a fluke. So that was a frustration that I did see a lot. But on the alternative, Amazon does do a pretty good job overall reducing inventory problems. So if again, Amazon will meet the demand. They update their forecast regularly. So if you are seeing, a lull in sales, or maybe you launched a newer product or a newer version that's kind of taking over that will reflect in your orders. So it's less to manage. If you're on the Vendor Central account, Amazon is looking at that for you. And I actually did see a question I can quickly answer here. You can absolutely, Lawrence, you can absolutely have a Canadian Vendor Central account and a United States Seller Central account. Just wanted to answer that quickly. And then as far as inventory, Ed, I saw that you asked who manages inventory at Amazon when you do a hybrid model. It depends. So if you are FBA, then Amazon will send on Seller Central, Amazon will send you purchase orders. If you're on Vendor Central, Amazon will manage your inventory for any of those ASINs that are in the Vendor Central account.
Just to clarify, Joanna, when you're on Seller Central, you will be able to ship whatever inventory you want, and you will be able to control your own inventory using the FBA program to fulfill. So inventory,
correct,
right? Yeah.
Yes. Sorry about that. Wasn't clear there. Yeah. So if Vendor Central, Amazon will we'll manage that for you. But again, it's always great to have a second pair of eyes, as I mentioned, just because you know your product the best, you know your brand the best. If you're doing outside marketing campaigns or featuring on any network or influencers, you want to prepare for a demand or Prime Day, even if you weren't within an Amazon promotion, you can still expect greater traffic too. So again, always pays to have a second pair of eyes on there. And then the next point you mentioned was price control. So Amazon will match the lowest offered price on Vendor Central. You don't have control. You aren't able to update your list price. I think this was about a year and a half ago they implemented that, and that was really just to gain customer trust. Amazon wants to offer the best deal. There's a few variations where they won't, but they'll still win the buy box. And a few things that Amazon considers is when you have a shipped and sold by Amazon, maybe it's $1 more than a competitor price, but it's still winning the buy box, and you wonder why. It's just because maybe that other seller they're not established or they don't have any reviews, and so Amazon might be the most legitimate seller, so they're still winning the buy box there. But it can be a bit frustrating when you have a new product and maybe it's only 3 months on the site and you're seeing it go down $10 below what you wanted the list price to be and what you intended for the MSRP to be. So that's something that to keep in mind, that you really just have to give up that control, and the best you can do is limit any third party you can send. There's a few actions you can take to clean up your detail page and to make sure that you're the only seller. And it's really tempting to go in and change your prices if you have multiple accounts, but I think the best way to handle it, I think, is just to write it out if there's if there's minimal competition, just because for whatever reason they got their hands on your product and they just need to sell out. So but yeah, it certainly was a frustration that Amazon controls your pricing, which is
Quick,
oh, yep.
just a quick question in regards to, I've heard that you can make requests to update the pricing as through the Vendor Central account. How successful, have you done that with some accounts? How successful have you been? And if you were successful, how long did it take? I feel like that's a question that a lot of the sellers I talk to often ask is, I'm trying to update the pricing. They got it wrong, or maybe there's a glitch and the pricing changed, and they say it's an error on Amazon's end. So, I know that there are tickets that we can create to sort of address these points. Yeah, do you have any insights into the change and the time it takes to get those things updated?
Certainly. I won't like my answer as much, but it really varies depending what the situation is. So if there's a huge price mistake, then Amazon, it will generally reflect in a high order amount. So one of the examples I can think of a couple of years ago is a pair of Gucci sunglasses retailing for several $700. There was a decimal mistake, and it was selling for $90. So it just sold thousands of units within minutes. And Amazon's system caught that. And so what they did was they flagged it, they suspended it from site. And whenever Amazon's in doubt, they'll always suspend a listing and then they'll investigate later. So if you're which can be a nice reassurance if there truly is a price error. But if there's no price error and you're just really flying through your product, it's very frustrating when all of a sudden you see a suppression. So if
Yeah.
you see a price error and you contact Amazon, if it's an error on their side, I find that they can fix it within 1 to 2 days. If it's something where their algorithm is just working to see, maybe the competition is lower, or a lot of reasoning I've heard from Amazon is that when I was there, that they're finding their sweet spot. So maybe if you list your product for $100, Amazon's assessing the competition on site and they're saying, you know what, we're really seeing a lot of $70, $80 price range success with these orders. We think that if we retail you at $85, that you'll see more sales. So then there's again not much you can do, and just that's kind of what they determine, and you just have to provide reasoning why your product is what it is. So maybe that might be a price breakdown, maybe that might be justifying the quality versus competition. There's a few ways you can do that, but again, if it's an Amazon mistake, they'll fix it much quicker. If you can just provide the catalog proof that hey, this is what we entered, this is drastically different. But again, if it's just an algorithm issue, it can take a couple weeks, unfortunately. It depends a
Right.
little bit
Okay.
too who you have.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good. I'm sure our audience likes to know that weeks can take place before any changes happen, but
Hopefully
Amazon
sooner,
is,
but yeah, they're
yeah.
they're not as quick to fix that or to provide reasoning to their algorithms, mostly because you're speaking with an associate and perhaps they don't have any insight, so they're just forwarding that to the correct team and to be truthful, the Amazon contact might just read it and they say, oh, the MSRP you listed was 90. We're just selling it for 80. I'm not going to prioritize answering this. It's
Mhm.
just the algorithm, or it's competition, or maybe your price too high. So again, there's a lot of factors to consider there.
Speaking of Amazon reps, so I think that's one of the big advantages potentially of working on vendor, and I think it's maybe a good opportunity to discuss. We've been talking a little bit about the challenges here a bit, but let's give vendor its due as well. So there are certain benefits to working with vendor, and there are certain things that aren't available to sellers on Seller Central if they do choose to switch. So can you talk to a few of those things that you'll have to part with if you do decide to move to Seller Central? Um,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So one of the big things that you'll lose are the product display ads. So that is exclusively with Vendor Central, and those ads are a really offensive way to promote your product. It's your advertisement showing up on the detail page of any similar product. So that can be a competitor. It can just be something that's relevant to the customer personally, based on Amazon's algorithm of how they shop and what they look for and what they might browse for, something to interest them. So that's one of the things that is sad to part with.
the
Hopefully that.
product display ads are the ones where you can target them by specific ASIN, right? So you can target your product, your competitors' products, and then you can also include them. I think our strategy is also to uh, target your own catalog ASINs to be defensive as well. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Any other?
Yeah, the big one, and I'm sorry, I should have started with this actually. The biggest one, in my opinion, is just the sheer trust from customers. So if something is shipped and sold by Amazon, I touched on this a little bit before, customers trust that 100%. They know that they're not going to have any issues, contacting Amazon customer service, whether it be email, chat, or phone. They trust that it will get there sooner, even if even if your FBA and Amazon is still doing the shipping. I think customers are still a little bit fuzzy as everyone's getting used to this, um, this mega Amazon, seeing it shipped and sold by someone else. Some people don't understand that even FBA means that it's shipped by Amazon, even though it might say it on the detail page. But again, it's just the customer trust. Most of the time, in my experience, I see that brands are even better to deal with than Amazon, and they're so happy to please, and they want to see, they want a great review and they want a great rating. They want to create a second customer, a returning customer. So sometimes I find that they're even quicker, but as customers are learning that on them by themselves, I think a lot of people will filter to Prime, which first of all gets rid of any third party FBM, so that's fulfilled by merchant. So then you're even left with just FBA fulfilled by Amazon and ships and sold by Amazon. So there's a few things again like that quick filter will get rid of any FBM fulfilled by merchant product just right away without even considering it. So I think a lot of people associate that with, oh, I'll have to pay for shipping then, or oh, I'll have to wait 10 days for shipping. I think just breaking customers of that habit is slowly but surely. But I think that's one of the big ones is just losing that ships and sold by Amazon um, um, significance. And then
The,
also, you do have a little bit more control with if you're having site problems. Amazon Vendor Central seems to respond quicker than to Seller Central, from my experience. If you're facing any problems with issues on site, or if you're facing any counterfeit issues, and hopefully you don't ever, but if you have your Amazon account, they seem to be a little bit more proactive in A, trying to identify that themselves, and B, if you raise any questions, providing some investigations there. And that's not to say that doesn't happen on Seller Central, but with that helps a few things with brand registry, making sure that you are brand registered and providing a lot of proof. Will in my mind get you the same results, but again, if you're on Vendor Central, it can just be handled a little bit quicker, or they can even beat you to the punch in identifying those areas.
Great. And what about promotional tools? So I know in particular, those who are accustomed to using lightning deals on Vendor Central, that's something that they can do all the time. And on Seller Central, you kind of have to be recommended. At least that's my understanding. Are there any other promotional differences between seller and vendor?
Yep, no, that's a really good point. That is one where Lightning Deals Amazon will pre-approve items, and that's just because it used to be all open, and they saw a lot of saw more harm than good come out of that. So I think that I have a feeling they'll give more control, especially depending on your account status. This is just my personal belief that it will veer in that direction. But yeah, as for now, I think just because Amazon has full access um, to everything, they're more involved with the Vendor Central catalog clients. They're handling, again, they're responsible for everything. So there's, in their eyes, almost less that can go wrong, if that makes any sense. But yeah, they also have Vine available. So that's not available in Seller Central, just in Vendor Central. And that's a really great way to raise brand awareness. If you're launching new products, Vine is where you're sending out your product to customers in exchange for a review. Hopefully they've certainly changed parameters a lot recently, but that is Vine's a great program in hopes of getting more reviews. If you're really behind your product, sharing it with the customer who accepts it and is willing to receive it based on their interest, it will be recommended. So that's something that Seller Central does not have, at least as of not yet. But that's a big item if again, if you're launching new products or if you're really trying to raise brand awareness.
And I guess so we talked about the vendor reps that exist and how, but what about those on Vendor Express, right? Who don't have the luxury of a rep and who never did. And Vendor Express is shutting down. So
Mhm.
what are they, they're being asked to move to Seller Central. But what about the AMS side of things? Is that something that they'll still have access to?
Yes, yep. As of now, you'll still have access to AMS. So I've had a few clients where they sign up for Vendor Central. I'm sorry, yeah, Vendor Express for the advertising benefits.
Great. uh, and no other alternatives available to them. So they wouldn't be, granted access to Vendor Central if they hadn't already gotten an invitation. So their only choice would be to move to Seller Central.
Correct. Yep. Unless they have a Vendor Central invitation.
Great. So no options there. Mostly looks like Seller Central is their best alternative. Great. Well, I think that really provides a really detailed breakdown of the benefits and challenges of Vendor Central. I think one thing as we transition to Seller Central are historical advantages that existed on Vendor that over time have been shifted over to Seller Central. So kind of what I'm thinking of are storefronts and I would say like headline search ads that were previously, AMS only, vendor only. What do you see? What were some historical advantages that, for those who aren't actively involved in the management of their vendor accounts may not know that are available on Seller Central today?
Sorry. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, just like what were some vendor specific advantages that now appear on Seller Central?
Oh, I think essentially what you mentioned earlier with more and more AMS becoming available, more promotions becoming available. One thing too is that the reporting it used to be more limited, and now it's almost we'll touch then that the next slide, but it's almost more robust than Vendor Central. But you're certainly able to appear in or participate in more event promotions. And again, yeah, you have control over you have control like Vendor Central used to have. You can update your list price, and now you can do that in Seller Central, but not Vendor Central. So there, yeah, a few
Hmm.
areas there.
Great. Well, let's look into Seller Central then. So we've outlined the benefits and challenges. So let's see if Seller Central can address some of the challenges, and then what are Seller Central specific obstacles that may sort of be something to consider before moving over. So Seller Central, I guess, if for those who don't know, it's third-party selling. Brands use Amazon as a platform or marketplace to sell to customers directly. The benefits there is you can still have Amazon do a lot of the heavy lifting and the fulfillment side of things by utilizing the Fulfilled by Amazon program. The margins are better. You're selling at a retail price directly to consumers, and the reporting and analytics are much better on the Seller Central portal. Challenges, of course, is the PPC tools and the differences between AMS and what is available to you on Seller Central and how that's changing. We can touch upon a bit here. And also, it's much more self-serve, right? So the administrative and operational, responsibilities will be on the seller and the brands themselves. So responding to customer questions, all of the inventory projecting and forecasting will be something that is the responsibility of the brand when utilizing the Seller Central platform. And then also, if you are transitioning from vendor, I think the issue that we have been discussing a bit and mentioning of buy box ownership remaining with Amazon is something that I would, definitely highlight here, and that's kind of involved in that hangover issue where moving ASINs to Seller Central, in addition to it can still remain just can sort of be a problem there. So I guess when brands are selling on vendor and receiving POs regularly, I think one thing to consider is moving to Seller Central to address that. I'm sorry. So yeah, I think that just trying to figure out what are the ways that Seller Central can address the issues outlined in vendor is really important. So do you have any experience, Joanna, using Seller Central to address some points that we've had, that vendors have had?
Yes, absolutely. So as you mentioned before, there's quite a few benefits to each vendor and Seller Central, but it really depends. Just want to emphasize, it really depends on what your internal structure is and where your strengths are. So, I've seen brands go over or clients go over to Seller Central because they just really felt they wanted to have that full control of customer service. They wanted to respond to everything, instead of having Amazon answer those kinds of questions and be in control there. So, and then some brands, might not be as well equipped for that, or they might not be able to respond quick enough. And so they really like Amazon to have that control there and really just rely that they're going to take care of it. It's just one thing off, load off their minds. So again, it really depends what your needs are, what your strengths are. But a lot of times, I think what I see mostly when people will or brands will open a hybrid account and open a Seller Central account in addition to their vendor is for control of pricing. So as we mentioned before, and it's been recently Amazon has taken away the ability to control your list price. So you can set it up and recommend it however you'd like, but at the end of the day, Amazon is going to use their algorithms and just control that. It can change once a day, it can change up to 10 times a day, which can be a little frustrating to sit back and watch. But I do have a specific example where I have one client and they actually opened up a Seller Central account and they only had 2 ASINs in their catalog specifically to control pricing. And of course, this is kind of a workaround, but this is really all that their needs required. And so they had 2 items where Amazon was lowering the price. So essentially they set it up in vendor and Seller Central, and to try and create that healthy price competition almost with themselves, but they were able to successfully bring Amazon back up. Because that is something, if there's whatever the competition is, Amazon will assess that and certainly take that into consideration when populating the new price for any ASIN. So that's, again, I see that a lot with the control. And then another huge one is profitability. So depending on what your product is, the seller referral fee might be less than what the co-op is. That's including co-op damages, freight allowance, market development research that Vendor Central provides. And it certainly is much more expensive, but you are getting the service of Amazon taking care of all the customer service. So there is that benefit to it. But yeah, a lot of times if there's profitability issues, being able to control that list price is a huge factor in regaining your margin back. In addition to having lower fees potentially. Of course, we do always keep in mind that profitability can really tank on Seller Central if your items are lower than $15. But that's something you'll have to just wait and see what the referral fee is for your specific category, as well as what it would be in Vendor Central. If you already have an account, then you'll know what your terms are. I certainly always urge you to negotiate with Amazon when that yearly contract comes out for you to sign again. But again, emphasizing the pricing control is a huge one with the benefit of opening a hybrid Seller Central account, as well as pricing as well as more control there too.
Great.
And
So
profitability.
what about some other, I guess, other advantages of the Seller Central platform for vendors? So if we're talking about this in regards to, the hybrid model where you do have both accounts open, what are some like promotional strategies or marketing strategies that you can implement with the Seller Central platform that you wouldn't necessarily be able to on vendor?
Yeah, so one of the big ones is promotional bundling, creating gifts or multi-packs, and this kind of ties into the example we talked about really early on. When you want to launch something quick, or maybe it's a test, or maybe it's just seasonal. For example, Q4 is just such a mad time. You see so many gift packs and just pre-assembled gifts, so it's kind of a one-stop shop. Is the hope, but using Seller Central to quickly get those items up on site, assuming that you have a good imaging team, if you're not using FBA, but having that quick seasonal item is much quicker to launch on Seller Central. Again, you'll have full control of the pricing, so you won't have any issues with profitability foreseeable, and so that's a huge one. Again, it could be during Prime Day, it could be during Q4, it could be due, Memorial Day sale times, whichever, or Mother's Day or Father's Day, something like that. But we use that a lot, leverage the option of having an open Seller Central account just to create a temporary bundle. And then, of course, you can always bring it back or change it, or once you're done, you can remove it from the catalog, or you can keep it live to replenish whenever you anticipate sales increasing there. So again, that's a great way to test. And again, a lot of times these bundles will stick and they become a big important part of your catalog and kind of make their way into being the bread and butter of your business. And so again, you never really know until you test. So Seller Central is a quick way to do that. A less expensive way to do that as well. You can have control over your inventory, so you're not just sending in a bunch of items. We see that a lot with Vendor Central. If they're having a big sale or something that you're participating in, and they're forecasting a lot of business, and there could be a fluke that's happened. They tried to do a Prime Day for the fashion department a month later last year, and it ended up not going through. And so a lot of clients were left with having a lot of inventory, and they weren't able to take it out as easily. So this is a pro with Seller Central, is that inventory control, whereas Vendor Central, they're just not structured to remove inventory. They're structured to receive inventory, file it, ship it out as quick as possible, but they really are slow to get inventory back out. So a lot of times, even if you request liquidation, it can take a long, long, long time, which can be very frustrating.
And what about if, like you were saying, if a product or a bundle that you created actually does become successful? Are there any instances where you would move them over to vendor? How quickly would potentially the POs, grow to justify that sort of transition? And are there any obstacles in moving them any products to vendor from seller?
Yep. So a few things to consider when you successfully have an item launched, say in seller, and you want to move it to vendor, maybe to have Amazon control that and no longer have to look so closely. The good news is that you'll use the same ASIN in DC, so already sales history on that, so you'll actually get POs a lot quicker, and you'll likely have a lot more quantities that will match more in line with your sales history in Seller Central. One thing to just be cautious of is if you have any inventory in your Seller Central account, you'll essentially be competing with yourself for the buy box.
Hmm.
So one, and in that case, Amazon, most will always win. Um, there's a few factors. If you have an incredibly low price, you're trying to liquidate it on seller or something, you might win the buy box. But Amazon will most likely always win the buy box. So your inventory will move a lot slower in your Seller Central account than your Vendor Central account. Just because Amazon is owning that. So that can be a hiccup too. You just want to make sure that you have a really clean inventory situation before moving one to another. Again, just because you're going to be sitting on a lot of excess inventory on whichever account's not winning the buy box.
So can you not fulfill POs until your Seller Central stock has gone down to zero and then decide, or like time it to a certain point? Is that something that you can do to prevent that buy box issue
Yep,
there?
absolutely. So again, you do have more control if you're a fulfilled by merchant. You can certainly just change your inventory to zero. You can also liquidate your inventory. So if you plan on moving over to Seller Central, I'm sorry, to Vendor Central from Seller, you can plan to liquidate your inventory. Running a quick promotion, lightning deal, coupon, whatever that may be. There are a few steps you can take to expedite that, getting into a clean inventory situation. Or again, you can just launch on both and just wait for one to sell out.
And what about in regards to, sort of bridging the gap when stock is low? So if like on the vendor side, you're fulfilling orders regularly, but you find that Amazon isn't necessarily making enough orders frequently or in the size enough to meet demand. If you open a Seller Central account, how would that necessarily work to cover those gaps
No, that's
there?
a great point you bring up. So if you have a Vendor Central account, and say you have a lot of varieties or variations in your catalog, just for example, if you're doing sizes or color differences, Amazon, they might not anticipate, a surge of sales. And so having a hybrid account open really allows you to eliminate any stock outs, which is so important just for a few different reasons. One, if you run out of inventory, it's really disappointing to the customer. If they go to Amazon because they believe they can find anything they want there and be able to buy it. So just disappointing the customer. You'll also lose a lot of velocity. So if you're out of order, I'm sorry, out of stock, then a customer might see it in their cart. They might remove it if they're not sure when they're getting it back. And then it takes a bit to regain that traction that you had before. So being able to offer inventory at all time, whether it's sold by Amazon or sold by your FBA account or sold by your FBM account, really just, again, it creates the best experience possible. And that's essentially why we're all coming to Amazon is they're so customer centric that, and of course it's more business, it's more, it's more sales in your pocket, and that's always great too. But yeah, just to reemphasize that the goal is to always have your product available. If Amazon's slower on sales, or again, they're not aware of a outside promotion that you're doing, or your presence on media or social media, that gives you the upper hand to really make sure that you're in stock and that the customer is able to order what they want. So that's a great point that you bring up.
Great. Thank you. And you've clarified it in a way that I never could. Thank you, Joanna. Trey's got a really good question, actually. He asks here, when he creates new ASINs, he does it on the
Mm-hmm.
Vendor Central side, and then he moves them over to the Seller Central, and then fills out and fulfills and does the management of the ASIN on Seller Central. His question is: do you suggest just adding the product on Seller Central first? Is that something that you can do? Is he taking an extra step that he
Yeah,
doesn't
I mean,
have to?
essentially what you're doing is you're opening the ability to quickly sell on Vendor Central at any time. So if it's something like the example we were just talking about, where you're closely monitoring your product and you're really wanting to prevent outages, there's no harm in having it in both catalogs. If it's something that you're not worried about, that if you plan on selling it through Seller Central and you plan on always fulfilling it yourself, there's really no need to set it up in Vendor Central first. It just kind of depends what your motives are. So again, if it's promotional and you wanted to be able to maximize every advertising option, then setting it up in both definitely definitely won't hurt you. And again, you'll be able to leverage the pros and cons from both, assuming that you need that. But if you're really just using it for Seller Central, there's not necessarily a point in having it in Vendor Central as well.
Hmm. Yeah, the lovely "it depends," on your overall goals answer, which is so true. I mean, everything always does depend at the end of the day on your overall strategy. So we have about 10 minutes left here on the webinar, and so what we'll be doing here is just sort of discussing our hybrid model and just sort of going through, what is Bobsled's hybrid model? And I guess there's a lot of ways that we can define this, but simply put, it's just having access to both Amazon first and third-party platforms and leveraging them to achieve a specific goal that would otherwise be impossible or challenging to accomplish on a single platform. I think, ideally, here at Bobsled, we would prefer, and it'd be a lot easier if we could just navigate, utilize a single platform to achieve the goals. But for brands, and I guess who is it geared towards? I think the ideal brand that this is geared towards, where you're kind of forced into using both platforms, is those with really large catalogs. I think from what I've understood in today's presentation, wide variety of pricing and profit margins. And I think, as you mentioned, Joanna, just any product priced below $15, potentially, they look like they're low profit margin items. And then the fees on Amazon, on the Seller Central side, kind of make it a little bit prohibitive to have success selling those types of products on Seller Central. So those are more often recommended on Vendor. If you don't have the traction, so then maybe utilizing the hybrid model to launch them on Seller to kind of build the velocity to make the vendor POs sufficiently sized to move them and transition them to Vendor. I think the other thing that we maybe didn't touch upon enough today is how Vendor is great for brands that are having issues with unauthorized sellers. One question I know that was asked is, when using AMS, sales can go to any of the sellers, and I think that's really true. So, one thing you really want to get a handle on is unauthorized sellers, squatters, and anyone who's trying to steal your buy box before making any big strategic changes. I think that's important to recognize. And really, Seller Central is great for those vendors that are looking to have a greater control on their margins and their pricing, on their inventory operations, and have the capacity to take on the work to do that. So that's the other thing. Vendor, I think, is really great to sort of sell directly to Amazon and kind of lean back and not necessarily have to do a lot of the heavy lifting there. And it's a lot of work to run two channels and to run both the vendor and Seller Central side. So by no means is this a decision to be made lightly. And really, whenever we pitch it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joanna, but we take a lot of time putting together presentations and strategy recommendations to see exactly how we would do so. And really the work required is something that we use as a last resort, more than anything else. On the ops side, what do you guys prefer if you were to choose, or does it depend? Which of the platforms would you, of the two, would you recommend more often than not? Or do you have the ops team sort of prefers? Do you have a preference, Joanna?
I do like the control that Seller Central offers. Again, just because pricing is such a hot spot with a lot of items. Very passionate about our catalogs on Amazon, and what you're selling are kind of they're your babies, and you're relying on Amazon to be your salesperson. You don't have the chance to sell your product in person. So having that control now that something I forgot to mention earlier when you asked. Enhanced brand content is an option that you can do on Seller Central that it used to be a paid service, or Vendor Central was only had A+ detail pages available. So you have a really fair shot on both accounts to really adequately sell your product, to add images, to the one thing Vendor Central offers, again, apologize for not mentioning this earlier, is that you can add video to your options, which depending on the product can be a big selling point. So I certainly apologize for missing that earlier. But all in all, I think that both platforms really provide a fair shot to get your product to customers, to answer questions, to advertise, to make yourself known and raise brand awareness. So I think if Amazon invites you to Vendor Central and you're able to negotiate an agreement that you feel comfortable with, that makes sense to you and your brand, I think they certainly on paper have a few more options. Again, like product display ads, adding video to your content, taking control over all customer service aspects, but Seller Central is certainly easier to navigate. And so what I see with a lot of clients is they're in their accounts every day, and they just maybe are looking for some more guidance on how to better manage your areas for opportunity. And so if you're really hands-on and you're in it all the time, I think Seller Central provides more metrics, which again, and better metrics too, which is kind of odd since that doesn't quite make sense to me, but anyways, that's either here nor there. So again, yeah, if profitability is a big problem, I think Seller Central is certainly the way to go. But maybe if you're a new branding, you're really looking for establishing your identity, then if you have an invite to Vendor Central, you'll certainly see a peak in sales being shipped and sold by Amazon until you can gain reviews and positive feedback about your seller account. So I realize that's a very roundabout answer. Hopefully the pros and cons can kind of help you decide where you are. I think having the hybrid option available, even if it's not you're using it for very specific fixes or opportunities, I think that's kind of one way to look at it. Is not a permanent solution, because we're certainly not recommending that you have 2 accounts to manage all the time and 2 reports to download and all that entails. But using each platform for what works for you. So, but yeah, I'm quite a fan of Seller Central and what it's become recently.
That's good. I think, yeah, just trends sort of are pointing a lot. And if you're Amazon, I always like to think about in Amazon shoes. If we can transition sellers more to self-serve, there's lower overhead for Amazon itself, which means it's a bit more profitable of an endeavor. So I kind of assume that that's kind of going to be where Amazon pushes sellers to. And I guess the other point is, it's always dependent on the client's specific needs. That's where my job is, to listen and to understand the specific challenges the clients are facing, and that I think there's no one size fits all solution to all of our clients that we work with. And so really what it boils down to is the specific objectives and the specific nuances of the catalog, and what you'd have to do to navigate. The workarounds that we've built using the hybrid model are, something that Amazon is always addressing, and so reviewing and reassessing the approach, and not necessarily resting on any or relying on any specific one approach to be the end all be all moving forward. So with that, I guess let's just quickly share a few, tips and tips for brands that are considering switching. I guess we really mentioned this throughout the presentation, but more time investment, that's essential. More control means more responsibility. It's really true, especially when you consider the guidelines that Amazon has being, quite strict, responding within 24 hours, the impact of not having stock, not necessarily forecasting your inventory appropriately, something that Amazon would maybe do better once they know the demand of your product on the vendor side. The buy box issue, which we discussed, and the considerations when adjusting your price. Mark asked, do you lose some pricing control once your products are listed on Vendor Central? Yes, you're correct. You would have to request permission. That'd be a ticket, and there's no guarantee that they would change your price even if you requested it.
Yeah, they do say 60 days is their approval time, and then again, as I was just mentioning, they can still change that if their algorithm sees fit. So they won't. I don't want to say honor, but they won't stick to your list price even if they do accept the change. They still have reserve the right to control the price as they see fit independently. So, So yeah, you can certainly put in a request to change, but it doesn't
So,
necessarily mean that will take effect.
true. I mean, that's isn't that the case with Amazon always? Yeah, you can
Right.
request things. You don't know if you're going to get it or how long it'll take to get any of your requests made. So lastly, I guess you've asked a ton of questions. I hope we were able to answer them. Brad, I apologize. The A plus pages was versus EBC. I think that the main difference is the ability for video between, they are fairly equal otherwise. And I know some EBC maybe there's some beta programs being run on the Seller Central side that may open up video to certain brands. I think like the luxury beauty brand may be one that has access to video on EBC.
Right.
Um,
Great point.
so, yeah, so there's always, I think there are always going to be exceptions on Amazon, where there are always beta programs, trials being run. So, if you do see anything that's new or odd or uncommon that was once available just on the vendor side or once available only to specific categories, I would love if you would take a screenshot of it and send it over to me and email it to me, and we can discuss what that means and identify new trends before they get shared to the rest of the community. And there's no guarantee. So I had a conversation with our Amazon rep yesterday about these types of programs, and just because they're testing them, there's no guarantee that they'll be implemented. So just be aware of that too. If there are any questions that you actually, have that we weren't able to answer, you can email me directly at Saeed, Said, at bobsledmarketing.com, and I'll do my best to answer all of them. The webinar itself was recorded and will be available to you once the recording is once the webinar is complete. And if you know anyone that would benefit or might be served to listen to today's presentation, do send me their email and I'll forward it to them. I'd love to share our insights with as many people as possible. Thank you again, Joanna, for taking today and for all the work you did helping me put together this presentation. Andrada, who you didn't hear anyone on the call today, was immensely helpful and important to getting this set up. So thank you, Andrada. And yeah, if Joanne, if you want to say a few parting words here at the end, it's been a pleasure sharing an hour here with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for organizing, and thanks to everyone who showed up and asked questions. We'll try and, again, answer anything we weren't able to during the presentation. But just my final thoughts I wanted to leave on is that I did see someone mention earlier that Seller Central actually provides better customer service, and that you can actually reach them on the phone at any times, at all times. Vendor Central, I think the last thing that I noticed, the trend before I left Amazon, is that they're really pushing towards using contact us case, and I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that you may have lost your rep or your vendor manager, or lost entirely, or very slow to communicate. So from my visions, Amazon's really doing away with that, and I'm seeing more and more pushes to Seller Central, and more self-service. So just something to think about too for those of you who are having frustrations with your current vendor manager. We're kind of seeing Seller Central possibly be the future for the majority of brands. So yeah, if you don't have a Seller Central account, yeah, certainly ask any questions you might have to get one open. But hopefully this is helpful to everyone.
Thanks. That's actually just a last point to touch upon that. I can't believe I've heard a few different clients that are sellers in the past talk about the paid vendors that they have, reps that they have, and the costs, anywhere from $50,000 to $250,000. So maybe they're moving it to a paid position and no longer, giving it to just any vendor, which is kind of nuts. But
Certainly.
with that little last tidbit there, thanks again, everybody, for sharing. Yeah, just an hour with us today, and we'll be doing more of these maybe in the future. So keep an eye out, and yeah, email me if you have any questions or if you want to get in touch. It's hard to answer everything. Every case is unique, so I'd love to learn more. Cheers, and talk to you all soon. Bye.